Welcome to the Annenberg Leadership Forum. The Annenberg Leadership Forum, formerly the Annenberg Leadership and Management Speaker Series, is an integral part of Harvey Mudd College's commitment to encouraging students to lead with integrity. Endowed in 2005 through a generous gift in honor of trustee Howard Deshawn III, class of 1989, and parent of two Mudders, the Walter and Leonore Annenberg Fund for Leadership Development showcases accomplished individuals who are recognized leaders in their fields. Through the Annenberg Leadership Forum, Harvey Mudd and the Annenberg Foundation are helping to shape our students' understanding and practice of leadership. These public events also encourage the Harvey Mudd College community in important thought and discussion about the role of leadership in the world. Last fall, the Annenberg Leadership Forum featured a panel of experts discussing innovative approaches to addressing global challenges and their interconnected roles of technology, education, collaboration, and inclusivity in driving progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals. In the spring, we welcomed Melody Hobson, co-CEO and president of Ariel Investments, and Anjit Singh, partner at Ardaman Ventures, for an inspiring conversation that explored how entrepreneurship can drive meaningful social impact. Today's conversation will explore how disconnection impedes progress in STEM and how we can actively reimagine and rebuild inclusive STEM cultures. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists. Reshma Saujani is a leading activist, the founder of Girls Who Code, the founder and CEO of Moms First, and the host of My So-Called Midlife with Lemonada Media. She has spent more than a decade building movements to fight for women and girls' economic empowerment, working to close the gender gap in the tech sector, and most recently, fighting for the structural changes moms need and deserve, including affordable childcare and paid leave. She is a New York Times best-selling author of several books, including Pay Up, The Future of Women in Work, and Why It's Different Than We Think, Brave, Not Perfect, and The Girl Who Code book series. Welcome. Next, we have Katie Shilton. She's a professor in the College of Information at the University of Maryland, College Park. Her research focuses on technology and data ethics. She is a co-principal investigator of the NSF Institute for Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence in Law and Society and a co-PI of the UMD Value Center Artificial Intelligence Initiative. She was also recently the PI of the Pervade Project, a multi-campus collaboration focused on big data research ethics. She is the founding co-director of the University of Maryland's undergraduate major in social data science. Welcome. Moderating tonight's discussion is Harvey Mudd College President Harriet B. Nembhard, an accomplished educator, industrial engineer, recognized nationally for her leadership in STEM education and innovation. Please join me again in welcoming our panelists and moderator.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dean Cindy, and welcome. Let me add my welcome to all of you here in the room and online, or perhaps listening asynchronously, to the Annenberg Leadership Forum. And let me welcome back those of you who were able to participate in our earlier event of the forum today, which was the Lunch and Learn led by the President Scholars. They did really a tremendous job. They had talked to other students and brought to us some of their findings. They surfaced the emotional and structural disconnection that shapes STEM culture and the real opportunity that we have to change that. So today's conversation with Reshma Saujani, And Professor Katie Shilton builds on what our students found. We'll talk about some of the underlying ideas. I have a few questions prepared for them, then we'll turn to questions from you. And then I will wrap us up a few minutes early so that Reshma can catch our flight. But I will wrap us up a few minutes early with a final question. So let's get into it. Okay, my first question for you, for both of you actually, is that STEM is often portrayed as this space of logic and theory, and not necessarily about emotion. But I want to ask, what have you learned about how empathy is lost and how disconnection shows up in STEM and what it costs us? Maybe I'll start with you, Reshma.
So, for the first time in my life over the past year, I had this thought that everything that I have worked for is being undone. And I saw that when I had Girls Who Code clubs that were being outlawed in certain states because you no longer could convene girls. When I saw NASA removing, the Ada Lovelaces and the Grace Hoppers, icons in computer science from our walls and erasing those stories. When I saw that so many young men were being tricked into thinking that the reason why they can't find a job, the reason why they feel lonely, the reason why they may be depressed was because we've given women too many opportunities. And that so many young men across the world were buying into that if we pull women down, we can lift you up. And it's when I really realize is that the powers that be have succeeded in dividing us and making us feel that progress is this zero-sum game. And that the biggest problem that we're facing right now is not AI or climate, or disinformation. It's actually disconnection. And it matters, especially, I think, in the STEM field. Through building Girls Who Code over the past 15 years, I now have, the gift of seeing so many of my students create things, build things, start companies, solve big problems, And I've seen the impact that diversity, including women's voices, in the field of technology have had in just making the world a better place. And that it's the disconnection that we're experiencing in society right now that arguably is going to dismantle the progress that we've so hard fought for.
Those are huge costs. Katie, your thoughts. How does this disconnection show up? What is it costing us in your view?
So I think that I come from the space of technology development, and that was a space that people wanted to get into because they wanted to build cool things to solve cool social problems. And we are now facing the techlash, right? In that we have watched tech companies profit by building stuff that is disconnecting us, that is playing on our sort of baser instincts towards anger and is not connecting us in the ways we were promised. I am old, so I remember when social media was about connecting with friends, but it turns out that wasn't where the profit was, right? It was in making us angry and creating influencers and all kinds of things that haven't necessarily led to connection. And so when I look at that situation, I think this is where a computer science that was divorced from emotion got us, right? There was a kind of knowledge that went into building these companies that was very logical. And traditionally in computer science, we have not been taught to look at how we feel about things as important to our design process. But what if that was central, right? What if human reactions and emotions were central to how we design things? What if that's where we started with, is this a good thing to build? Is this something we want? Is this something that will help us flourish? And I think that empathy, you mentioned empathy, is like a huge piece of that, and the ability to sort of respect people's emotional knowledge as a form of knowledge that goes into design, right? Because we all have lovely designed objects that also have a lot of emotion in them, in our homes. And why doesn't computer science work that way? Why don't we want lovely things that help us connect?
Yeah, and I think I love this. I mean, we've been nerding out about this all day. And I think we've made this like false assumption that through capitalism that people want to be mad at each other and hate each other and be outraged at one another. And so everything that we've created and the creation of these tools and these algorithms have been justified by saying, well, that's what people want. But we know that that's not true. I mean, millions of people watch on a daily basis pandas hugging and kissing. You know what I mean? Or, different ways we were talking about the tool that like brings people in community together that like the same kinds of films.
Right, like the popularity of something like Letterboxd, right? Yeah. Which brings people together to talk about this thing they love, movies, right? Like there is great design out there. There are great communities.
Yeah. And a great desire to actually connect. I think the thing is that we have this opportunity to actually encourage all of you in this room that are our future designers, builders, creators, saviors of humanity, right? To think about that as a requirement for design. I said this in my speech, like if what you're building brings us together, keep going. But if what you're building tears us apart, stop. And that is an important thing that we have to infuse into education right now.
And I think, how do you know, right? How do you know it's going to tear us apart? Well, okay, that's a big
ask. How do we know?
It's a big ask to say, is your thing going to cause disaster? But paying attention to your emotions, and that's like, those are signals, right? Like this is what we tell our kids, right? Like your emotions are a signal for something, listen to them. Yes. Right? Like that means something if you're saying, if something, and I think we've been taught to think of that as like a separate brain, a separate space, but like actually like that's because I don't know that I could say that, people can always predict if the thing they're going to build, if the AI they're going to build is going to, lead to destruction. But if you're nervous about that, listen to it.
Right.
And I appreciate what you said as well, Katie, that people come into spaces, into interactions with different levels of emotional preparation and capacity. And I want to pick up especially on this issue that relates more to some of your work, Reshma, and your advocacy around women and girls. That also has to do with uplifting communities and families. So the two are not necessarily disconnected, although there's been an attempt to try to force that sort of disconnection. But, I noted that in a lot of your work, you've challenged traditional ideas of strength, brave, not perfect, and other similar sorts of work. What would you say needs to be perhaps redefined about masculinity and femininity, especially in STEM spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I want to, Helani, I think the work that you guys did this morning and really outlining how people feel in classes, I think we're such a great example of this, right? Because oftentimes, and I see this across universities, women tend to work together or alone, and men tend to work in groups. And when you ask women, like you did, why do you work alone or why do you feel like you need to work in isolation, it's because they think the men have more information, more knowledge, are more prepared. And that's often not true. And I think that puts pressure, quite frankly, on both genders, because I think young men are culturally being pushed to showing strength, knowledge, and information that they themselves may not have. Oftentimes they're up all night wanting to ask questions too, but we gaslight them for that. So both young men and young women are not able to learn and to be whoever they are because of gender stereotypes and norms. And I really see this play out, quite frankly, in STEM and in computer science departments. I speak to a lot of them everywhere. And I think your survey today really, showcased that. I thought what was also exciting about what you guys talked about today is there's real solutions about that. And I think the solution to this is really about uplifting vulnerability. What if you could say, I don't know the answer? What if you heard the men in your class be like, I was up all night, I didn't know what to do? Instead of being like, oh, I know, when they don't, right? What if you didn't have to work by yourself and you actually could work in a group and ask questions because you weren't worried that you weren't smart enough to be here or that you didn't belong?
So you're tapping into something I've seen you also remark on, more specifically, a silence around men's mental health. Could you say a little bit more about that in your recent
I mean,
event?
I think men and boys are in crisis right now. And I'll be honest, like I'd be sitting in a room like this and someone would raise their hand and then she'd say, well, shouldn't we teach the boys to code? And I'm like, no, they're fine. And then God gave me 2 sons. And I still said, no, they're fine. Until I had a 10-year-old and I was like floored by the things that he was being sold. And, the reality is that, we do have a suicide epidemic. We do have a loneliness crisis. Men and boys are in crisis. And having empathy for them, saying that out loud doesn't take anything away from any of us as women. And what we have to recognize, I recently did a Substack post on having empathy for men, because here's the thing, I'm a women's activist. I've led my whole life fighting for whether it's girls in education and now affordable childcare and soon to be disconnection, right? I don't need to be right, but I want to win. And I realized that for far too long, I was just leaving male allies on the sidelines. But even and men wanted to be there. 50% of Girls Who Code teachers are men. 50% of my board at Girls Who Code is men. My 3 first top donors at Moms First were men who had single moms who understood what I was talking about. So men have been there. But I will tell you this, as someone who's been doing this work since I was 13, I never invited them into my movement. I never thought to break bread with them. And because I found it like another thing I gotta do. And look, that's how we feel. And I get it, I feel that way, right? But do we wanna be right or do we wanna win? And the reality is right now we are in a gender war. Far too many young people I talked to today, I said, I ask young women all the time, do you have friends that are men? Oftentimes the answer is no. And then they take a step back and they're like, wait, you're right, I don't know what happened. So we are being intentionally divided. And when we're divided, we don't see each other, we don't feel for each other, we don't have empathy for one another. But when we actually interact, in many ways socially, we then understand one another's struggle and we see our struggle in one another. And that is the work, the most important work that we have to do right now. We're in this moment in this country in a real conversation because we are so divided. It is absolutely true. And oftentimes the conversation is, well, how do we debate better? How can you debate when you're not even connected? The first thing you got to do is actually connect. And then you can talk about how we argue better. But there's a missing step that needs to come first that we're not paying attention to.
Thank you so much for that. Katie, I want to, with that as preamble, I want to start to think about how we intentionally build for that connection. And give us the answer. In an academic space like this, and this is how I want to set this up. I'm on a National Academies panel where we are doing a rapid consultation exercise to share information around the science of merit in these conversations around what are meritorious admission standards, right? The National Academy work is being teed up to look at the science of merit. And from that standpoint, I want to start to channel perhaps some of what might be, some of the hurdles if we start to spend time on connection, right? Start to spend time on supporting connection in a STEM environment. How do we do that without sacrificing excellence. What does that look like?
I think we have to diversify the kinds of knowledge we count as design knowledge. So there are a lot of ways to be smart. There are a lot of ways to have merit. And design work, specifically technology design work, I'm actually not talking about like industrial design here, or, which has, I think, learned this lesson well because they need to appeal to lots of consumers. But computer, technical design, digital design, has for a long time really narrowed its expertise into one sort of form of being smart. I mean, and it's, then that is the ability to code and the ability to sort of see systems in particular ways and move data around. And yes, we still need all of that, although that we could have a separate conversation about AI and how it's impacting that. But regardless of how the technical details of how systems are built change in the next few years, we need other forms of design knowledge and much more diverse forms of design knowledge in the room to say, these are problems that need solving in my community, right? These are ways that this system might foster disconnection accidentally, that we don't intend. Unintended consequences is one of the hardest part of designing technological systems. And you're doing this powerful thing by putting a system out into the world, and you don't always know. Well, yes, if you have a very narrow set of people in the room, you don't know. But if you start asking people from broader communities, like, how would this work in your setting? And this is kind of what shows like Black Mirror do, right? Is they get you thinking in this way about what could happen if we deploy this in this context, right? What could happen if we try this with kids, which is like what the tech industry keeps doing, right? It's like giving tech to kids that what would happen? Well, it turns out it's not great. So all of these questions of like, these are expertise that sociologists have. These are expertise that educators have. This is expertise that church leaders have. This is expertise that politicians have. Why don't we have structured ways of bringing them into design conversations? Yeah. We need to think of design that expansively.
Wow.
If we are designing for everyone, for
right.
connection.
Right. Very powerful. Well, what I want to do is to go ahead. Time flies. I could have 4 more questions just from what we've already talked about. But why don't I ask we go ahead and put the QR code up so that you can be entering your questions, thinking about your questions. And while you do that, I just want to have both of you think a little bit about how students can tell the difference in terms of connection when we as an academic institution are offering them real opportunities, structured opportunities to connect. How will they know the difference? How can they tell the difference? What should we start to expect? What should they start to expect?
I mean, I think we don't know until we ask them.
Okay, what do y'all say? What do you say?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, what kind of connection would you like to see
Right.
us foster here? Or what kind of connection is missing?
We start to see some of that in what the President's Scholars offered and what the table conversation was about today.
Like, for example, I think one of the ideas that came out was live intervention. What was that? What it was? Where it was essentially like, if you're in a classroom and you see siloed groups, the professor live can actually mix them up as a way of fostering connection.
Any thoughts from your perspective, Katie? What should we be looking for?
So, I mean, I think a lot. My students think a lot, and so therefore I think a lot about like, what do they need for their resumes, right? What do they need what do they need before they graduate, like to tick the boxes to get the job that they want? And so it makes me wonder, can we incentivize somehow, or can we make part of an academic? And I think, small institutions and liberal arts institutions have existed to do this for a while, which is like, yes, you have to take some classes on other campuses, or you have to take some classes in a different, program. So we do some of this already, right? And I think and hope, that institutions will do more of that. But I also wonder if there are ways we could incentivize connection, maybe, freshmen and seniors, or we've been talking about a class that we might run in both locations, like, on the East Coast and the West Coast, and with really different student populations where you all would have to work together. I don't know.
I speak at companies a lot, and one of the number one things I hear is when students come for their first year job, they cannot talk, they don't know how to talk to one another, and they don't know how to socialize, and they don't know how to interact, especially with people who are different than them. So I think that in of itself is an incentive that when you walk out of college, right, you are actually really good at being able to strike up a conversation with someone who is very different than you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, the idea of, going back to one of the suggestions that came up earlier around having faculty or staff being able to help intervene and help to encourage students to work together and to break down some of those silos. How do we ensure that that's not just done for the sake of doing it, as opposed to real belonging, real connection, not just in different groups? So what are some of the next things that we need to be thinking of to build the connection? Or maybe the flip side of that, would you say that there are any particular warning signs that we should be, on alert for?
I mean, we do this thing when we have a staff retreat. What's it called, Katie, when we do the live tree? Do you know what I'm talking about? The river. River of life. A river of life. Anybody ever done this before? Where basically you have to, if you're in a team meeting, you take out a piece of paper and you draw the river of your life. And you actually are incredibly vulnerable, right? With often people you are meeting or working with, and you've never met them live because we have a remote team. And I think it just creates this enormous sense of just I see you, I feel you. Oh, I had a brother who died too. Or I had something traumatic happen to me in childhood. Or I'm really insecure about X, right? It's and when one person starts opening up, other people start opening up. And you see these kind of relationships and these bonds really happen through this, essentially vulnerability. Back in the day when we were growing up, you do that whole thing where you fall and the group would have trust fall, right? It's almost like we have to figure out how we have more of these kinds of interactions with one another to build that sense of trust. Because right now it's we have an enormous amount of distrust with one another.
I wonder if it would. So one of the things I've been thinking about, and from today's conversation, was, how do people know that they have voice? And one way that you know that you have voice or autonomy is that you see that change has been made based on what you have input. And so I wonder if a sign of successful connection is something that you can name that changed for you, for that person, for that group. And then if we could start talking about those changes as evidence, right? As okay, so that was something, and because I think we've all had some connections in our life, right? And what changed because of those connections? Okay. Then if we start there, does that make it more worth it somehow? Because you guys are busy. My students are busy and worried, and so I keep thinking, what makes it worth it for you to invest in this extra thing we're asking you to do? And maybe it's evidence of change. Maybe it's evidence of something that got better because of connection. Okay, and then what does that look like if we start to, I don't know, keep a change CV or something, like that of times we connected that it was worth it.
Yeah. Well, I know the students that the President Scholars who were working on the earlier part of the forum, talked about that, just that we have the time, being able to create the time and intentionality around doing those things that we know would be better for all of us in the long run. But let me pause here and kick it over to Dean Cindy to see if we have a couple of questions or two from our audience for you.
We do indeed. So one of our questions is, in the face of recent setbacks, how do we continue to amplify empathy in a system that doesn't want us to?
That's
I'm glad they're asking you.
well, yeah, it's a small question. Because that's how change is made. There's a story about Moses and being an unsung hero. And I think for me, as someone who's been fighting for women's rights, I realized that I might die with less rights than I was born with. And it's true. Most of us in this room are likely to die with less rights than we were born with. And
Unless, come on, Reshma,
Sorry.
unless.
this is where I go Debbie Downer. Okay, fine. Just me. Okay, just me. But my point is like, even if that were true, I had to ask myself, would I still get up and do the work that I do? And I think the answer is yes. Because I think the point of life is to try to leave it a little bit better than you were born with it. And it shouldn't be the outcome. Or it's like the journey towards, I always say there's a difference between excellence and perfection. It's like it's the journey of it. And so I think that progress is always this way. And we're in this moment, right, where we feel like it's being received. I always say this for STEM, like as you all know, right, it's like the world's first programmer was a woman, you know what I mean? In the 1990s, half of America's gaming camps are full of girls, right? The technology workforce was probably at 42, 43%. And then in the 1990s, like the programmer came out, Weird Science, Revenge of the Nerds, and we turned all these girls off by shoving them in the pink aisle in the toy store, right? And we had this enormous decline. And we were back at graduation rates of women in computer science at 18 or 19%. So when I started Girls Who Code, that was my thing. And I was like, oh, you want more girls to go? I'll teach all of them, right? And 10 years later, we literally changed the college graduation rates from 17% to 42%. And I used to always think, gosh, what were those women doing in the 1990s? How did they let this happen? How did they let them snatch victory from the jaws of our whatever that term is?
Mom.
Thank you.
No, I'm blaming our mom.
Right.
I'm like,
I'm like, what were they doing?
right. Can't believe you're
And
blaming
then-
your mother. But yes, right. No,
But now it's my fault.
that's right. It's us.
Because this is the exact same moment that's happening right now. And we are actually getting to witness progress being stolen from us. And we have to ask ourselves, are we going to let it go down that way? Are we just going to watch it? No, absolutely not, right? And we may not win, but we sure as hell are not going to go down like that.
We must try.
We must
try.
We must
keep
try, and
working.
we must be smarter. I mean, one of the things that I think has been really, really just incredible is, as I go speak to women, even though they're not supposed to have the ERG, they're having the ERG. And they're inviting people, and they're
ERG,
doing this thing.
everybody up, ERG.
Like these women's
resource
groups,
group. Employee resource group.
A
is
lot of
usually
it,
the
right. So
industry.
my point is like people are still doing it. Like I know, when you told me today you want to go back to Hawaii and teach, my heart just was full, right? Because you are not, I built something that gave you an opportunity, and you are not going to not make sure that someone else doesn't get that opportunity. And I know that we all feel that deeply in our soul. And so that gives me hope.
I think something I tell my students is look for those little levers of power that you have right now, right? And so maybe that's one thing for, people sitting on stage, but like, can you code? Yeah. Right? Like, great. That's a lever of power right there, right? You can build something. Can you teach? Right? Another one. Are there things, and I have this obsession with like trying to transform the cultures of big tech companies. And Reshma reminded me today, no, you just start new ones, right? Like, you don't have to transform those ones. You can start new companies, right? So many of you in this room have the ability to do that. Maybe not today, but soon. And so like you look for those little places that you have power, and then you act in them. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Heather?
Okay, for the next one, I'm going to combine two of them. So do you have any advice for overcoming imposter syndrome?
Oh,
And
Lord.
specifically, one example is for someone who has self-doubt and giving themselves patience, where they're often quick to assume that they're wrong and get frustrated with themselves.
So, before I gave this Harvey Mudd speech, I gave a speech on imposter syndrome at Smith College, which I hope all of you watch. Here's the thing. Imposter syndrome is a lie. It is literally like, that doesn't mean that your feelings of not feeling like, wow, it's strange, I'm the only woman in the room, are not valid. But the term imposter syndrome is a lie. So one of the things I want to point out, Reshma Saujani loves a good con. You know what I mean? And I look for cons. And imposter syndrome is an example of a con. So the imposter syndrome, the word came out in the 1970s. And for those of you who are history nerds, you remember the 1970s was like a killer year for women, right? Roe v. Wade was decided, Title IX was decided. We had the largest amount of inflood of women going into the workforce in the 1970s. And so women were just killing it. And right when that happened, this term, imposter syndrome, came out. Now, if you look back at history at moments of incredible progress of women, you'll often see these terms, often disguised in medical language, that come out to basically discourage women from making change. This also happened in the 1900s when the bicycle came out. So for those of you talk about design, when the bicycle first came out, it had this big wheel in the front and this little wheel in the back. And the people who loved the bicycle and used the bicycle were women. Because remember, at that time, the suffrage movement was happening. And so women, instead of waiting for a guy to show up on a horseback and drive them to their meeting, they could just hop on the bicycle and go by themselves. They could get rid of those big skirts and wear pants instead. I mean, when the bicycle came out, was an enormous accelerator for women's progress in the 1920s. But at the same time the bicycle came out, this term called bike face came out. And in every town, you would see a flyer, and it was a flyer of a woman, and her face was red, and her nose was swollen, and she looked like a hot mess. And that's because, remember, when you were on a bike, because of the way it was designed, you would topple over. And so bike face, the term bike face, was used to dissuade women from riding a bicycle, because the bicycle was leading to too much damn progress. It was the same thing with imposter syndrome. For all the women in the room, how many in this room have not done something because they had imposter syndrome? Raise your hand, I won't judge you. Most of us, right? So when you see things like that, when you see terms like that, and oftentimes people think when they have imposter syndrome, it's just natural, right? Because it sounds a little medical, like bike face. But to me, these are tools and tactics and strategies used by folks in power to dissuade women from making progress, from fulfilling their dreams, from crushing it. Because let's be real, oftentimes women, quite frankly, are a threat to other people's power and potential. And so you got to remember that when you start feeling like you're not good enough, that you're not smart enough, that they know more than you, because they don't, because no one ever gave you anything. You did not cheat to get into this room. There is no meritocracy in this country, let's be honest. So the more, especially right now, it's so important you hear this right now. While they are busy dismantling opportunities for women, you should not be busy in telling yourself that you are not good enough. Right now, more than ever before, you need to know that you can and will do anything. Because we won't make it if you don't. We just won't.
Yeah.
It's hard to say it better than that. I'll say just my rule of thumb, if somebody asks you to do something, they think you can do it. You probably can. And if you try it and it turns out you really can't do it, okay, then you ask for help. What's so bad about asking for help? Nothing bad, right? So somebody is asking you to do it, you probably can. You should try.
I guess I will just add to that. The word imposter syndrome, the term imposter syndrome, it just never really landed with me. I didn't really stop very long to analyze it and dissect it and understand what was wrong with it. But I heard this amazing podcast a couple of years ago where a researcher, I'd have to look back at the details, but a researcher had called this into a question in a way, in a pattern that's familiar to me. And one of the things that I always say is that to never ascribe a deficit of the system to an individual, right? I'm always on the look for that, right? And that's just my industrial engineering background, right?
That's
like, this looks really more like a system deficit. So I didn't really pause with that one too long, right? Just from that standpoint, right? That it didn't really add up. That's my own 2 cents for that one. Yeah. Right. Yeah, always an engineer.
So your recommendations often require us to slow down our efforts towards competitive goals. How do we create communities where competition and connection coexist?
Repeat the question, please. That was well phrased. That last turn of phrase.
So the last part of it is, how do we create communities where competition and connection coexist?
That alliteration is just brilliant. Whoever did that, I love that. Okay, yeah.
Huh.
Did you feel like they don't?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is competition going away? Are we worried about that? It's a great, I totally see the slowing down. But then actually, are we asking you to slow down from competitive goals? I don't think so.
No.
I think we would say, recognize broader expertise on your way to winning that competitive goal or trying. It's okay if you don't win too, by the way. But yes, or vying for it. I would say, I'm not sure I see them in conflict, especially because competitive goals, yes, sometimes just one person.
Did someone ask that question here that wants to explain it?
That's such a good question.
Okay, go for it.
So I was just wondering, within competing with another person, how do you connect on that level with them? You're still competing with them and have that empathy for them.
You've had this experience together though, right? If you've both competed, is that the word? Yes, for the same thing, right? The 2 of you actually might be the only 2 people who truly understand that, right? Or the 3. And so yes. And so I was talking about this with another faculty member here today. We had both had the experience in our career of not getting the academic job that we really wanted and having it gone to a friend and colleague. And that being a bummer, but also connecting to that colleague about it because they also had competed for that job, right? And they remember interviewing there at the same time we did and they had a similar experience. And that's kind of cool that we both had that experience, even though I didn't get that job.
It's a really good, it's funny, as you were asking that question, what I kept thinking about is how this has kind of been the debate around affirmative action, right? That essentially now that we're in a moment of scarce and limited resources and goods, how can I have empathy, for your historical oppression and take a step back for my own or my child's own, opportunities because of something that happened to you. And I think, again, it's because in many ways, because of disconnection, we've been sold this hierarchy of oppression. And everyone's got to figure out where they stand in it and where they don't stand in it. And I just don't think that that's the right way of looking at it, right? Because I think connection and competition in many ways are not in opposition to one another at all. But I think the way that we've sold it is like, it's like I said in the beginning, that progress is zero sum. And we've made too much, that's why we're disconnected, because we've been sold that progress is zero sum.
Yeah, I think we do have these, false causalities, right? That if we take time to build connection, that perhaps we're less rigorous, or that we have somehow sacrificed excellence, or some of these other sort of false equivalencies. And I think that part just has to be, rejected on the surface, to say that these things can actually complement each other, right? The knowledge about what it takes to be in competition form, right, can be a point of connection. So those are all excellent ideas. Do you have one more short one? Maybe one more short one?
Can you share one practical action that faculty, staff, and students can take tomorrow to strengthen connection and inclusivity in STEM?
Where to start? One short, easy thing.
So mine is not short or easy, but it's directed at faculty because that's who I know the most about, who to speak to. Today at lunch, we were talking at our table about the ways that faculty can foster connection in classrooms through very purposeful discussion shaping. So facilitating a discussion is not a skill that anybody learns in graduate school. So your professors did not learn to do this. But there is a science to it, or at least an art, in terms of making sure that people who haven't gotten to speak have spoken. I'm having trouble with my past tenses tonight. Making sure people who said something get credit for that later in the discussion. And those are things that an active facilitator can do. And I think faculty thinking of themselves as active facilitators of classroom connection would be a really powerful, I think would really help tomorrow.
So, I think for the students in the room, or I guess for anybody, I want you to think about, everyone picture somebody in your head that you just don't really care for or like, or really think,
Reshma,
or
this
really,
is where we're going?
sorry, we are, or think that you have anything in connection with. Picture them in your head, and they have to be in proximity to you tomorrow. And look, you can, and I want you tomorrow to ask them out for a cup of coffee. And I want you, why are you shaking your head? I want you to have a cup of coffee with them. And then I want you to DM me on Instagram or email me, which I'll give you my email, and I want you to tell me one thing that you found in connection with that person that surprised you. You don't have to like them. You don't have to agree on anything. But what is one thing that you're like, oh, we both love dogs?
Or, courageous listening, right? How do you put yourself in a position to not necessarily agree, right? But to just
I don't think
hear.
it's right. President, I don't think, right, we've talked about, it's not about agreement. I think we're in this moment where we're trying to get people to agree, in this political moment. We don't have to agree. But we have to see each other's humanity. You sent me that beautiful podcast with Isabel Wilkerson.
Yes.
And do you want to say it? Or you want to tell a story? You want me to tell a story?
No, you tell.
Okay.
Yeah, you tell.
Thank you so much for that blessing. She said, she was talking, I was like, well, Wilkerson's amazing, but she was saying, COVID was such a gift. Because it affected everyone. It didn't care what your politics were, what your gender was, who you loved, what your religion was. It had no discrimination. And one would have thought that going through this experience would have brought us together. But COVID made us realize that we're all humans, that we are a human species. Before anything else.
Before anything else. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we should be able to connect there. Well, let me bring this home. Let me bring this home by looking to the future. And we've done some of this in some of our earlier questions today, but I want to be a bit more intentional. And I want you to help me imagine our students 5 years from now. They're working in labs. They founded their own tech companies. They're teaching. They're inventing. They understand the importance of being more connected, right? I really love what you said as well, Reshma. Either you said or you sent me a clip about, it was the tears of things that you sent me. We've just had such a wonderful time connecting and sharing knowledge of the tears of things that we don't want to be this angry with each other. We do not. I think that is very true. And if we're imagining our students at this moment, knowing and learning and being open to being more connected, and they take that with them 5 years from now to do other things in the world, what do you wish for them? What do you wish for them in terms of what they've done in terms of culture, long-term impact, legacy? Could you perhaps frame what you might hope for them from this point forward and from the work that we're going to be committed to doing?
So I think a lot about satisfaction that you get out of your daily work practice. And in 5 years, you all will be in careers. And so what I would wish for you is that you are doing work that you get satisfaction from the technical piece. You're solving problems, you're manipulating the physical world in interesting ways. Like, that is fun, right? And you will get satisfaction from that. But you are also getting satisfaction from your daily work because it is allowing you to connect with a broader group of people that is advising you on what to build and how, with a group of people who's benefiting from what you're building. You're getting satisfaction because you have that connection in addition to all of the cool daily other stuff you get to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that we are if everybody in the Valley says we are just in this moment of real, like it feels like the dot-com boom, like everybody is creating and thinking and building in this technology in this moment we're in. Everything's going so fast that it is just literally this incredible opportunity to build. And I think that there is a false sentiment right now that the things that we build invariably will tear us apart. And that's just the cost we pay for, the price we pay for innovation. And I just call a lie on that. And I want this university and this generation to be the ones who save us and save humanity and prove them wrong, prove them that we don't want to hate each other. We don't want to be torn apart. We want people to create and design things that make us love each other and respect each other and care for one another. And I think that it will be engineers, it will be you in this room that save us. I really believe that. I really do. I really do. And I think our job is to give you the tools and the opportunity to do that. There's some trustees in the room that will give you the funding to build the things, enable you to do that. But everybody here, and there's so many professors and teachers in this room that will give you the knowledge and the wisdom. So we have everything we need in this room to just create the kind of world that I think we all desperately want someone to create. But like they say, no one is coming to save you.
Yeah.
You gotta save yourselves.
Yeah. Well, I receive that hope from you both. I receive it as a blessing. I believe that connection is not a detour. It's our path forward. So thank you for being here, and help me to thank our panelists.